My name is Tony Frederick Armstrong, former Director of Visitor Experience and Director of the National Museum. The St. Christopher National Trust gift shop is temporarily located at Heroes National Park, just close to the Robert L. Bradshaw International Airport. I don't want to get into too much detail at this time. I'm just going to introduce to you the folks who are with me here at the head table, and I will be chairing the question section at the end. I have with me this morning Ms. Etsu Bradshaw Keynes, who is the Executive Director of the St. Christopher National Trust, and the President of the St. Christopher National Trust Board, Mr. Kevin Taylor. Mr. Taylor, I'm going to give the floor over to you to make a statement on why this press conference has been called today.
Thank you. Tony Frederick Armstrong. Good morning. First, let me take this opportunity to thank my board members, some of whom are present here today, namely Mr. Alphonse Ogaro, who's the immediate past president, our executive director, Ms. Etsu Bradshaw Keynes, Mr. Snideman Warner, Ms. Patricia Walters, Mrs. Giselle Matthews, Ms. Laverne Brooks, Mr. Pierre Liebert, Mr. Larry Harmony, and Ms. Janet Archibald, and to you, our special guests, for coming to this important press conference. Also, I want to thank Ms. Tony Frederick Armstrong for willingly accepting to chair this meeting. And again, I say thank you very much for that. Also, I need to offer my gratitude as the president of the St. Christopher National Trust and on behalf of the board of directors and the members to Mr. Andrew Huey and his team from SKN Newsline and TVC Channel 40 for recording and streaming this press conference free of charge. Mr. Huey, thank you very much to you and your team. Today, our goal is to provide our valued members and the public with accurate information regarding the restoration project on the old Treasury Building, home of the St. Christopher National Trust and Museum. The St. Christopher National Trust is a non-governmental organization that was established by an Act of Parliament in the year 2009. The Trust transitioned from the St. Christopher Heritage Society, which was established in the year 1989. The primary objective of the Trust is the administering and preserving of sites, buildings, objects that are of archaeological, architectural, artistic, environmental, and historical importance on St. Kitts. Construction of the Treasury Building began in 1894. It was completed and occupied as the Treasury in 1896. It is the official home of the St. Christopher National Trust and Museum. The building has been invested in the National Trust. Repairs to crack walls were done over the past few decades, but these past repairs utilized modern cement which reacted with the original limestone mortar. Ultimately, the use of Portland cement led to further cracking and even crumbling of the surface of many of the walls. Additionally, the roof is in dire need of repair, which leaks threatening historical artifacts that were housed in the museum on the upper floor. In 2018, minimal scaffolding was erected to stop crumbling stones from the rooftop from falling onto the sidewalks. Numerous assessments made it clear that specialized expertise would be needed to repair decades of old deterioration. Monies were allotted in the national budget passed in December of 2022 for restoration work on the building. A contract valued at $1.8 million was signed between Parvenir Restoration Trinidad and the St. Christopher National Trust on behalf of the government in July of 2023. Pioneer is an industrial leader with an outstanding reputation. The National Trust building restoration was estimated to take 9 months for completion. Amendments were made to the contract in August, and after a 10% mobilization fund was paid, work got underway on the 11th of September 2023. The project saw a significant amount of ordering going up around the entire building to protect pedestrians moving in the vicinity of the edifices. In December 2023, there was a break in work for the carnival festivities, and Pavoni and his crew returned to Trinidad. They returned to St. Kitts in January of 2024, but left soon after due to the lack of funding by the state for work that had already been completed. The outstanding monies were eventually paid in July 2024. However, additional costs incurred by the contractor due to client delay were not paid until February this year, 2025. Pioneer has submitted an adjusted schedule to our project manager, Mr. Limburg Alvaranga from BOA Architects, and is preparing to be back on the ground in St. Kitts as we speak. Work is scheduled to resume this month, April 2025. The Trust and Pioneer have received a commitment from the government of St. Kitts and Nevis that funding will be made available to complete the project. Due to the amount of time that has passed, there will need to be a reassessment of the structure and completed work by the restoration specialist, engineer Daniel Steele. By bearing any significant issues, it is expected that the project will be completed by year end. Thank you very much. I now hand back over to Ms. Tony Frederick Armstrong.
Thank you so much, Mr. Taylor. Just to clarify that the figure that Mr. Taylor quoted of 1.8 million on the original project is EC dollars. So we do want to make that clear. We're going to open the floor now to any questions that have arisen from the statement that Mr. Taylor made, or if there are any related questions, specifically as it pertains to the project or maybe other work of the National Trust. If you can identify yourself when you ask the question with your name and your media house, that would be most useful and appreciated.
SKN Newsline. Mr. Taylor, you indicated a figure of approximately 1.8.
Yes.
That's for the EC for the original project. Is that the entirety of the cost of the project? Because I originally heard a figure being quoted during the time of the Dr. Timothy Harris's administration of about $3 million. So what really is the overall cost of the project, at least the original one? And with all these years having passed, I will assume that that price has also gone up. You mentioned having to do a reassessment of the building, but still, even so, that hasn't been completed. There must be some kind of indication as to what could be the overall cost of the project. Having said that now, government is given a component of the funds. I'll assume that the trust will be trying to access alternate funds from someplace else. Could you talk about that, please?
I have with me our project manager, Mr. Limburg Abaranga, who will respond to your question. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. With regards to the sum for the project, the sum quantity was original for the construction or the restoration of the building itself. So that is just one part of the project. So we want to restore the structure. So that's the 1.8. It's actually 1.835, but we won't be going into that much detail. As for the $3 million quote that you heard before, I'm not sure where that came from. The ED can speak to that. But I know that there's a larger project which involves the fixing up or the repurposing of the interior, and maybe the additional funds would have gone to that. I'm not sure what the allocation of funds was, but I can speak to what was signed in terms of the construction budget. The other part of your question, which is the alternate sources of funds, I can't speak to that either. But I can speak to the fact of the construction budget. Yeah? Okay.
Good morning, and again, thanks to everyone for being here. And I know I have been introduced as Etsu Bradshaw Keynes, the Executive Director for the St. Christopher National Trust. I must say that this is a project that I fought hard to revitalize in 2022 when I took office. A lot went on before me, a lot. And when I was able, with the help of board members and some other committee members and Mr. Alvaranga and his team at BOA, we were able to restart the project. So I am not in a position to talk about any $3 million. What I know is that when we sat down and we calculated what it would take to complete this project, as my good project manager, an able, capable project manager said, it was about 1.835, which we know that $1 million of that is now allocated for this year. We don't have, the trust does not have any other source of funding for this project. It is a project that the state has committed to fund. So we don't have any other source of funding at this time.
Ms. Bradshaw Keynes, if you could speak at this time to how the National Trust is funded generally, and who the building belongs to, and who is responsible for its upkeep and these capital projects like this.
Well, as I know, my president would have said in his comments or the press release, which we will be making available to everyone after. The trust, as I know, based on reading the act, the trust is, sorry, people have this number to call. The site is vested in us. But our funds, our revenue, I would say comes from 4 sources. Membership. Secondly, we have a small subvention, and I say small because it's a subvention of $17,500 that we get from government monthly, and we have bills to pay. And the other 2 sources, or I now would say 3, I apologize, the museum, the gift shop, and the documentation center. Now, everybody knows that we are closed at this time because of the restoration project. So the museum, we don't have that revenue right now. The gift shop, and I know we'll speak about that later. We'll also speak about the museum later, but right now, the museum is closed. Unfortunately, we had to make sure that we protected those important documents for the documentation center. So they're all put away in storage. So those are the sources. And Mr. Amani?
Mr. Amani, did you want to weigh in or ask a question?
Greetings. My name is Larry Amani. I'm a founding member of the St. Christopher Heritage Society. And I was present when an arrangement was made with the government of the day for the St. Christopher Heritage Society to occupy the old Treasury building. So an arrangement was made between the government of the day that the St. Christopher Heritage Society would occupy the building and establish the headquarters there, and that they would, in a sense, manage the restoration of the building. So a memorandum of understanding was drawn up between the government and the St. Christopher Heritage Society, in which it was understood that the government would maintain the building and the St. Christopher Heritage Society would establish and manage a national museum for which it would get a subvention from the government for that purpose. The building was never vested into the St. Christopher Heritage Society. The building is the property of the state. So I think that should be clearly understood. And the memorandum of understanding was never, as it were, maintained, or shall we say, the responsibilities of the state towards the maintenance of the building had always been problematic. So we are at a place now where we, in a sense, are part of a saga that began many years ago, where there would be funds allocated towards the maintenance and repair of the building for certain periods, and then no funds for other periods. And even the subvention to the St. Christopher Heritage Society was very sporadic. As a matter of fact, the actual initiation of maintenance of the building, in terms of the roof, in terms of the flooring and all that, were instigated by the St. Christopher Heritage Society, who sought funding for that purpose. Much of this funding were from agencies, other governmental agencies, German, French, etc. And they were sanctioned by the state. But the funds were actually raised on the initiative of the St. Christopher Heritage Society. And the management of the museum continued under the St. Christopher Heritage Society until, of course, it morphed into the National Trust. So I think that we need to put these things into context. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that background information, Mr. Amani. Are there any other questions coming from the floor? Unfortunately, we're not able to be streaming this live, so we had expected to be able to receive questions from viewers, and that's no longer an option. What we would like to do is, folks who are now watching the recording of this press conference, they are welcome to contact the National Trust. Questions can be sent, shorter questions can be sent to 6628743, 6628743, or you can also email the National Trust for further information, or even an interview if that was something that was of interest, to info@stchristophernationaltrust.kn, info@stchristophernationaltrust.kn. So I know Ms. Bratt Ms. Bradshaw Keynes, and of course, by extension, the board, they still would make themselves available to answer any questions that viewers of this recording may have. You had another question for us, Mr. Bott.
Yes, there have been some complaints about the barrier, the board that is constructed around the building, particularly on the roadside. For one, people are saying it has been there so long that it has become an eyesore. The board probably needs replacing. It looks bad. It's not good for tourism, basically. And secondly, they're wondering why couldn't some other means of protection be employed rather than simply to put the board in the street that really puts pedestrians in danger from the traffic. Can you talk about those factors?
I thank you for that question. And let me first say that I understand and I sympathize with the fact that we can, but we pray that we don't have any problems with pedestrians. But I almost want to be daring and say we have no other choice. We are protecting not just pedestrians, but we are protecting drivers. And we have to understand that, as we said, the work has started. So all of the, and my project manager again can correct me, because he's a technical person here. All of the cement has been removed. So the stones are now, most of them, sitting there, not really secure as they will be when this project is completed, because we now have to start applying the limestone. The other thing is that inside of those boards, we have an exorbitant amount. When I say exorbitant amount, I'm talking about in funds of materials that we have to protect for this project. The materials have to sit outside. We're talking about the limestone that a lot of money was spent on, even before my time. The one thing, though, is that I really wish, and I'm saying what my wish would be, is that we could have had the traffic lights, if not moved, but maybe closed off there, and we could have moved the pedestrian crossing. And this is something that, again, I would have to write and probably try to see if the traffic department can help us with it. You talked about the tourism. I did have a conversation recently with UDC, and again, we don't have monies to paint these boards. What we did, and it was a request, we did put signage to let people know to pardon us because of the appearance and ask them not to lean on the boards, etc. Why? But this is an open invitation to the public and anybody who would want to, with the approval of the board. Then we can probably get some paintings or some, because I would love to see if somebody had the funding to help us to put the new renderings up of the beautiful museum and or inside the beautiful renderings of what this building is going to look like in the future. So this could be an appeal, but we don't have the funds to go and paint these boards. It cost us a lot already that we had to dig into the funds that are allocated for restoring the building. But the main thing is for the security. And all we do, we ask persons, please, maybe not to try to pass along that side where the hoarding is, to try and get on the other side safely and maybe walk along the other side of the street. And that's all we can do, really appeal. And also appeal to drivers when they're driving across there to maybe slow down and look out for pedestrians.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bradshaw Keynes. Did you want to add anything to that, Mr. Alvarenga? Okay, all right, Mr. Taylor. Nothing to add to that. Can we ask you to come to the mic? And Mr. Huey, you had a question afterwards. You'll be next.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a member of the trust representing the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, so I'm here representing a body, not myself. In terms of Mr. Bad's question earlier about funding and the estimate to complete the building, I think I wanted to just ask another question to get more light shed on that, because I think it's important to understand that the estimate that we're speaking on of 1.8 odd to completion is really, in my understanding, is for the outside and the faithful restoration of the structure itself. And that does not include the interior finishings and the renderings that BOA has proposed as a possible end project, which includes possible ancillary services inside, your museum, your shop, possible cafe, bathrooms, all the rest of to actually complete the project on the interior. And he can probably speak to what the estimate on that is. Or maybe we don't have that unless it's approved by the board for the final finish. But I wanted to raise that because I think that will answer some of where the disparity is in the budget and the figure presented and what is been approved by government and what is going to finish the outside, bring it back, faithful restoration fully to its original days, and what will the inside would be. That's one thing I wanted to raise so we could get a little clarification for persons listening and for the press themselves. And then the next point I wanted to raise is that it's a shame we don't have traffic here or someone from the traffic department, because, you know, we're speaking about what we would like to see, but the authorities who we have to work with to make things happen, whether it's sustainable development, the ministry in which we are working with. And the good news is that, I think there's good news in all of this. It's not all damper that, you know, our project managers, probably could say, I don't know if we have a date when the Pavana group is to return, but we are in that space where the project is to resume. Am I correct? Shortly. So there is some good news, not all damper, but the bad news is that this historical site and this building is an eyesore in the heart of Bastille. As one person said about tourism, well, you know, we're selling a destination, and we're seeing obviously our own history and our own building falling apart to ruin in front of our eyes. And unless we stand up and speak about it, I think it's all of our responsibilities here to see this thing go forward. And not just for tourism, but for us as a people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And, you know, we could speak about the clock in the same way. The heart of Bastille, the beating heart of our town is dying. It was once the most beautiful, unique town in the Caribbean. And it's no more, whether we sit down and let that happen or we do something about it. But in terms of traffic and the pedestrians, this morning I was on that road, and again, there are people being very wary, very scared, very cautious about traffic coming around that area. Thank you.
We're going to ask Mr. Alvarenga to come back to speak to the inside-outside question. While he is heading that way, I should mention, Mrs. Matthew, that prior to your coming in, the president did indicate that Parvenir is en route, and work is expected to resume this month and hopefully be completed by year end. You know, all things being equal and barring anything unexpected.
Right. So on the question of the separate projects, The initial project, again, is the restoration, faithful restoration of the old Treasury building. And that has, we separated it because of the availability of funds into two projects: restoration of the structure, and the second part is the interior. We have only gone as far as a initial preliminary design. So there's not been a budget, and the design is still not even finalized. So we made a presentation to the board. We received some feedback. The board then now needs to come together, I would say, gather all the necessary comments, streamline them, and then create a definitive brief. We showed what was possible in our preliminary design. We made a presentation at your AGM, can't remember which one it was, and one of your AGMs, and it was well received. It did, for the most part, it did receive some criticism, but again, that is expected, because we are not everybody's going to have the same opinion on everything, but that's what it's there for. So the board themselves have some work to do to bring all these opinions together and then create a definitive brief, and then we will make the necessary adjustments to the preliminary design, and then from there we will take it forward and create a budget for that part of the project. Yeah. Any further questions on that?
Mr. Hugh, you had some questions? And while he's going to the mic, perhaps I can challenge Mrs. Matthew. You talk about those, those boards being painted and being beautified and how nice it would be. Well, I'm hoping that you'll carry that back to your membership and see if the private sector would be willing to assist the trust in that regard. If I may be so bold, I know that it was burning Etsu to say that, right? Mr. Huey, you had a question.
Hi, good day. Mr. Alvaranga might need to answer this one. It has to do with the beam, this section right above that was compromised some years ago, and was actually the main reason why the barricades were placed in the first place. I don't know what work was done on it. I know that some kind of work was done on it, remedial work. So maybe you could explain to us what was done to protect it from further damage and also danger to pedestrians and motorists. And this would be directly for the trust, this question. In terms of what Ms. Matthews spoke earlier about in terms of fundraising, in terms of the financial sustainability of the trust, how is that really? Most of your funding, of course, comes from, as you said earlier, from membership fees, etc. But how sustainable financially is the trust, and how urgent it is, if there's a need of urgency, to find other sources of revenue to maintain the work of the trust, because the trust is important to the nation, to nation building. But if you don't have the funds to keep it active and keep it sustainable, then that, of course, is a problem.
Well, seeing as Mr. Alvaranga is standing, we'll let him respond to the first question, and then Ms. Bradshaw-Keynes, you'd be in the hot seat again after that.
So, thank you for the question. So, in this project, Mike, I'm engaged in the capacity of project manager. The engineer is a specialist engineer from Trinidad called by the name of Danielle Steele. She would be the best person to answer that question, but I will try my best in her absence to let you know that what we did was we did some hoarding and some temporary measure to keep that loose. It's what they call like a porte cochere that they had there. That bit is temporarily supported right now, but there is a final design that's already been approved for them to restore that piece. So, and as Ms. Bradshaw-Keynes had indicated, the initial work was to remove all that corroding Portland cement that was used to point the building. So right now the building is in a bit of a vulnerable state, so the hoarding is necessary to protect the building and also to protect the public. Yeah. Thank you.
And to remind us that Ms. Steele was here with us last year. just before December, because we wanted to point out the concerns that she had with the heavy music, etc., around carnival time that could have caused some more displacement. So I know that the public has met Ms. Steele, because we remember we were on Freedom, and we took her on the program traffic. It was a traffic matters or whatever it was, program. And as a matter of fact, I will apologize, but I'm happy that when I was talking, my phone rang, and it was Ms. Steele. And I just let her know we're in a press conference, because I'm engaging Ms. Steele, because she knows she's on call. But if I said to her today, listen, the contractor is here, she has to get up and we have to get her on a plane to get her here. So just wanted to say that. Thanks.
But in regards to the viability or the sustainability of the trust?
Okay, yes. But I want to say I want to ask the members to have that trust and put that trust and confidence in us. We are working. We're going to get your building done. But we need them to pay the membership and not give up in us. And we also I need persons. When I came on, I saw committees. I had a meeting with my committee members. Some came, and I'm asking the committees to come back on board and let's start working together, because I cannot do it alone. Our board of directors, we can't do it alone. So I'm appealing to the committee members who have already promised that they will work with us to find ways to get revenue. We're an NGO, so we need help.
And to go back to an angle of Mr. Huey's question, can a refurbished museum, dock center, and gift shop sustain the National Trust? Is that enough income?
We know, and I'm happy, I'm smiling, because the rendering, and my good friend here, and I said my good friend, he's more than my good friend now. We're at the hip, we're joined at the hip, because we spend so much time working on this project. What we have put into the design, and I have to mention here the other two partners, Nick and Fonsonia. They're in this too with me and with us. And Fonsonia and I sat down together, and their office, they have given us their expertise. And the new interior is not just going to be a dock center, a museum, and a gift shop. We would be able to host functions. We'll have conference rooms, weddings. Also, we are going to have a modern cafe where research can be done. I know when I went to school, I did most of my research and my assignments in a cafe, because there's a library there, the dock center is right there, and I could have a cup of coffee. We could have our branded cookies. And branding, that's going to be a big thing for us. That's the way we want to go.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bhatt, sorry to keep you waiting. You had another question for us.
I just want to get some clarification about the building itself. Now, you have indicated that the Portland cement was removed. Is that correct? So the stones are just simply sitting on each other. I need to get some clarification, because I am thinking now, if there's an earthquake, if there is a really serious hurricane, that building can then begin to crumble.
So yes, the building is in a vulnerable state right now, but it may not be as bad as you might think. So some of the original mortar is still in place and is still doing its job in holding it together, but it would need to be reinforced with the additional mortar, which we now have in place, but still to be applied. Yeah, and there's still some other restorative work to be done on the roof itself, to be done.
And structurally, in terms of the integrity of the building, is it still sound?
Let me get that question on Mike.
So
Mr. Bart, I can repeat it.
The
Oh,
question
you
he
can-
asked is if the integrity of the building structurally overall, if it's sound. Overall, yes. There is some part of the roof that is a little bit questionable. That's falling. That's a bit on the side towards Port Zante. There's a bit of a crack in it that's leaning a little bit towards that side. So we just need to do some work to bring that back. That's the only part of the structure that is of significant concern to us, but it wouldn't be falling on the streets. On the streets, there are bits and pieces that might fall off, but not a significant chunk. Let me see what else is there. No, the rest of it I think we have in hand, especially with our specialist engineer, Daniel Steele. All the necessary designs and interventions have already been documented and form part of the scope of works for the construction crew. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Alvaranga. Mr. Bart, yes. Sorry, we need you on the mic, Mr. Alman.
So here I am again. In terms of the structure of the building itself, I mean, it's like Brimson Hill. The fortress is standing there. And in the early years of its restoration, a lot of the work was done with Portland cement as well. Because gravity is holding the stones in place. And of course, underlying that is the original mortar. The issue really, I think, is fundamentally that of the pointing. That is to say, the rendering on the outside in the joints between the rocks themselves. A lot of that was of Portland cement, and yes, so you can chip away that, and you can repoint using the appropriate material to prevent the ingress of moisture and other things that will cause the building to crumble. And of course, where there are cracks, then that becomes a more fundamental issue. So the building will not crumble like that. Of course, if we don't do anything about it, eventually it will. But really and truly, what has brought me to the microphone is because of certain comments and questions that have arisen during the course of this conversation. And I feel moved to say that in the early years of the St. Christopher Heritage Society, there was a strong core of membership, who were passionate. And a lot of the work that was done to grow that organization came about through the voluntary efforts of its members. A lot of in-kind contributions were made as well. And we had some very strong corporate support. Shortly after the Heritage Society was founded, space was made available on a building, the top floor of the corner building, Bank Street and West Independence Square, that was owned by TDC. TDC allowed the Heritage Society to use that space as an office. And there were other corporate entities in Bastia, including banks and financial institutions, that supported the work of the Heritage Society, which included, at that time, the maintenance of the building, until it reached a point where some of the corporate entities are saying, why should we be spending money to maintain a government building? I think it's very important to recognize that. Now, times have changed. People move on. Administrations come and go. And not just the political administration, but the technocrats within those organizations. So that for many of the permanent secretaries and the senior civil servants and so on, there is not necessarily that cultural support for heritage and all that. We have to recognize that. But I believe that, yes, we can make an impact if we can attract greater corporate membership. And indeed, we had a very dynamic relationship with the Chamber of Industry and Commerce through its Barca Beautiful Committee, there's a synergy between the work of the Barca Beautiful Committee and the St. Christopher Heritage Society. We worked together, we worked jointly on many projects. And yes, there was international funding, but I really, really strongly feel that as an independent country, we need to look internally for the solutions to our problems. And I believe that sustainability is possible, but you have to attract people. You cannot appeal so much and beg. You have to make people want to help. And you have to therefore do the kind of things which our ED has suggested, the kind of strategies that will attract people. And of course, with the situation now whereby the funding has been released for the further restoration of the building itself, then that is a very strong selling point. We need to attract people to the organization so that they can continue or return to a culture of giving of their service, giving of their time, and even giving of their resources in terms of maintaining the organization and growing the organization. So yes, I think the corporate community is a very important element that we need to tap into, but also the everyday person on the streets. We have to know, as it were, promote the notion, as the motto of the Heritage Society was, and perhaps the motto of the National Trust still is, our heritage belongs to all of us. And if that message can go out there amongst all sectors, the corporate community, the individual, the schools, the institutions, the people in government, the senior civil servants and the ministers and all that, then I believe really and truly that this thing can be sustained. It's a lot of effort. And some of the activities that our executive director mentioned, the reaching out, I think one of the things that the National Trust has been thinking about is as a gala event and all that. The reaching out, I think that once we can attract people, then people begin to understand and believe that really and truly this is ours and it is for us to maintain and to move forward on. Thank you.
Mr. Amni, we only have about 5 minutes left. Mr. Huey, you had another question. I saw you standing at one point. Okay, we only have about 5 minutes left if anybody wanted to ask another question. Otherwise, I would turn it over to the President to make some closing remarks. Mrs. Matthew, you look like you have a question on your tip of your tongue. No? Oh, okay.
No, I just want to reiterate, as a corporate member and representing the chamber, I would like to endorse Mr. Amani's comments about engaging the public, and I think people would step up once we, as a trust, do our job to reach out and to engage them. I think we'll get good, positive response.
Okay. I'm not sure if the mics would have picked that up, but essentially she's endorsing what Mr. Amani has said, get the corporate community and the public involved in saving the trust and keeping it going. I'm going to turn over now to Mr. Taylor, our president, to give some closing remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Armstrong. I want to thank everyone also who came and gave insight, asked very good questions, and I hope those questions will answer properly and correctly. And I must say that this press conference is of one first and yet more to come. So we'll be coming forward and updating the public as need be going forward for the future. So again, we want to thank you all very much for coming and taking the time out to be here with us this morning. Also, I have to thank again Mr. Andrew Huey for his service that he's offered to us here this morning, and Mr. Alvarango, our project manager, for taking the time out to be here with us this morning. Yes, no problem.
Remarks, but we did want to give Ms. Bradshaw Keynes a moment. As you say, we're reaching out to the public So let's make a pitch.
Yes. Sorry, talking about reaching out. Just wanted to let everybody know we have made the announcement, but I want to clarify. And I talked about not having a home, but sometimes somebody takes us in. And I want to say that first, let me go back and say thank you, because the chamber, we can't thank them enough. And Member Matthew, you're here. And also, I know that Member Walters, even though she's ours, she's still on the chamber, so she takes back the messages for us. But at one time when we had nowhere to go, we were occupying, well, first my residence, I pulled in everybody, and then also the chamber opened up to us, and we were there. But then still the sleepless nights of revenue. And so one day I had the aha moment, and I called the Prime Minister's office, and we got the National Heroes Park. It's not ours, so we're sharing it. But so far, I want to invite everybody, and we're going to be sending out letters to the tour guides, because we are working along with the persons who are there at the National Heroes Park to bring it alive. I know they're having some functions, but it's not just about the functions. It's about also still getting the revenue for the trust. So we have opened a beautiful gift shop there, and I know Member Matthews came to see us, and I heard that she had nothing but raving reviews. What we have started doing is bringing in branded items, because we listen to our buyers, we listen to our tourists. And our next step, we are working on opening, there's another section, there are two sections up there. So we're utilizing one section as an office, and sometimes an office, and also the gift shop. I want to thank the management there for putting up with us. The other side, there are 5 kiosks only, which are the kiosks of the 5 national heroes. And so what we are doing is we are now working, and I say we, and I have sitting right here. I have already pulled Tony, our good Tony, because she has the institutional knowledge, and also Mrs. Jackie Armony. They're working along with me and my team and some of the people from the trust, from the National Heroes Park. We will be opening a mini but dynamic local history museum. We are targeting to have this up and running beautifully for September 16th, National Heroes Day, when everybody comes up there to the park to see the parade. And we will be opening our doors for them to come in and see what we have to offer. And then we are encouraging the schools, because we have that beautiful park there. We can do some educational activities with the schools, the children, the youth. So we are working. We're working to get there, so that I'm hoping too that when we return to our home in Basse-Terre, that will be a satellite site. So we will still be there. And I hope that this is a hint, and I hope that our friends who are hosting us and the Prime Minister's office will allow us to stay there.
Thank you very much. I do believe that's a wrap. We are going to, once again, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. I know Mr. Taylor has done a fine job of closing up this session for today, so we'll send that back to Master Control, Mr. Huey.